All praises, family. All praises to the heavenly, holy, almighty creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, and all there is. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit. And we are back again, family, for our spiritual and intellectual elaboration and expounding and growth. And we're revisiting the Mormon Church's call for racial reconciliation. And for this review, we're going to look at a little bit of the Mormon Church's history so we can understand their doctrine, where they are presently, and what their supposed reconciliation should look like. And family, we of the 12 tribes of the house of Jacob, when we come into the understanding and we are unplugged from the world society's presentation of deceit and deception and trickery and sorcery, we know that all of these religions' bases were founded on very racist, vicious ideologies as it pertains to how nations of the world feel about so-called Black or Negro people. So here's some further insight into the Mormon Church's foundation and what they believe as it pertains to their God and his philosophy. And we began. The racial doctrines and policies of the Mormons. Those with a belief in Mormonism have long struggled with a series of racial doctrines that were implemented and reinforced by LDS prophets, Latter-day Saints prophets. The church canonized and promoted two separate racial doctrines, one pertaining to African Americans, the other pertaining to Lamanites, Native Americans, and other non-white peoples. While never apologizing, admitting, or denying culpability for divinely attributed racism called doctrine repeatedly, the church now suggests it does not know exactly how its race-based policies and doctrines originated or why they have perpetuated. Further, it refuses to see the ways in which yesterday's doctrine, proclaimed by the prophets with direct access to God, becoming tomorrow's disavowed policy, attributed to generational bias and prejudice common to the time period in which they were perpetuated. The LDS prohibition on priesthood ordination of males of African bloodline and male and female temple admittance originated without any corroborating revelation. Discussion among First Presidency or vote of common consent. It formally began with Brigham Young in 1852 and was accepted later by leadership and continued unquestioned as if from God. Having conducted a private study on the subject, President David O. Mackey understood the ban to be merely policy as early as 1954 at the beginning of the Civil Rights era. Yet, it wasn't until 1978 that President Spencer W. Kimball managed to obtain the required approval of the full quorum of the 12 to make an official change. Growing social pressures inside and outside the church, expansion into potentially profitable and racially diverse communities, political pressure manifests in the censure of BYU athletics, and exclusion from various leadership circles and intense personal lobbying among Latter-day Saints presidency finally provoked a reversal of policy that was first called God's will before mysteriously becoming unexplainable. The LDS Church's second unavoidable and broader race doctrine, often associated with the idea of Lamanites, remains canonized as scripture in the Book of Mormon. The notion that dark skin originated from God's curse upon the unrighteous ancestors of Native Americans and others like those of Polynesian ancestry. As many members maintain a literal interpretation of the Book of Mormon as a factual historical record in accordance with prophetic instruction, it is troubling to see how God's explicit curse of dark skin and the supposed promise from God that dark skin will be turned white has been used to justify additional racial discriminatory theories within the church, such as the Indian Placement Program. Such notions are reflective of archaic and thoroughly discredited thinking. In the modern scientific age, we can be certain that the skin color of America's First Nations people is not the result of a 2,000-year-old curse. Today, the LDS Church takes pride in claiming that its current doctrine is inclusive and that its membership is diverse. It has made official statements which disavow racism. However, there are still serious questions to be asked about the so-called process of revelation that lags far behind society as the leadership ages, and about whether or not older policies of prejudice and justification continue in old and new ways. While the Latter-day Saints Church proselytizes successfully in many countries, positively portraying the teaching of the Book of Mormon as a literal record of a group of Lamanites whose descendants are to be seen in disparate parts of the world, it has not yet fully reckoned with the racist doctrines which were the basis of the ban, from temple blessings to those of African ancestry. Latter-day Saint Church race doctrine regarding African Americans. Although there are many Christian traditions that use the Bible as justification for racial prejudice, segregation, and teachings about inferiority, including many Christian traditions in American history that bolster the institution of slavery, the LDS first presidencies in many eras have relied upon uniquely Mormon scriptures, such as the Book of Moses and Abraham in the Great Pearl of Great Price, to justify its racial prejudice as doctrinally based. Here are a few of the specific Latter-day Saint scriptures that Joseph Smith, whose current essays of the church imply was free of racial prejudice of his time period, and which later infected Brigham Young and others, enshrined as God's words. Quote, "There was a blackness came upon all the children of Canaan, that they were despised among all the people. They were a mixture of all the seed of Adam, save it was the seed of Cain. For the seed of Cain were black and had not place among them." Quote, "From Ham sprang that race which preserved the curse in the land, and the lineage of Cain was cursed as pertaining to the priesthood." Quote, Parley P. Pratt provided the first recorded priesthood ban statement in April 25, 1847, when he instructed, "A black man with the blood of Ham in him, which lineage was cursed as regards to the priesthood." The church now suggests that the Brigham Young initiated the policy as he issued a public proclamation in 1852 denying blacks the priesthood. Under Brigham Young's leadership, Utah would become the only Western territory to enshrine slavery and slave sales in territorial statute. Family, so the church foundations were based on a revelation of the curse of Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, and that curse translated, I guess, over to Ham, Noah's son, and that curse proliferated through Canaan, and that curse, I guess, was black skin. And because black skin represents the curse or the blood of Cain, there was a justification for the enslavement, subjugation, discrimination, denial of so-called African people or black people or Hamitic people from the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Church of the Mormons. So, from the first brick of their foundation and policy, it was founded with the cement of racist biblical theology. So, in regards to their reconciliation of this philosophy and their hopeful messages of inclusion, we will watch their actions, we will watch where they put their money, and we will keep in mind always that a wicked seed will bear a wicked tree, which will produce wicked fruit. So family, as we continue in expounding and creating a greater area of understanding for ourselves, we will remember, we will understand, and with our light and hope, we will submit for it to get better. All praises. So, we will continue into the doctrines and philosophies of the Mormon Church, and we will also open it up for the other denominations under the guise of Christianity, so we can continue our everlasting learning as we continue our living and our loving. So, until we are together again, I love you. I love you. I love you. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit.